What's up guys, I'm back for another video, and today's video is going to be about the issues that I've had with my FRS while I've been tracking it for the past 2 or 3 years. Before this video starts, I want to give a quick shout out to my sponsors. So the first sponsor is Apex Wheels. They make very nice wheels for the FRS BRZ86 that are also unique, cost effective, and look really good. Next sponsor is FRS Engineering. I'm going to talk about them a little bit during this video and the cool products that they make, but they do make a lot of stuff for the FRS BRZ, whether it's for aero or whether it's for engine parts or cooling. They make a lot of cool stuff and you should definitely check them out. Now, normally when I do these videos, I would have my car behind me to show that I actually do own this car and I know what I'm talking about, but unfortunately my car is still at a shop getting its new cage installed. So as proof that I do own this car and that I do have some validity in what I'm talking about, I have a part of the car right here. This is the new trunk that's going to be going on my car. It's a honeycomb carbon fiber trunk, like fully carbon fiber. It weighs like nothing, but it's going to be able to hold the new wing that I'm getting for the car, which is massive and is going to be producing a lot of downforce. So now you guys have proof that I do own an FRS. So let's get into the issues that I've had with the FRS while tracking it over the past 2 or 3 years. Now, the first and biggest issue that I had while tracking the FRS is the transmission. The transmission in the FRS, like I've talked about in many other videos, is probably the weakest link of the car. And the reason for that is because it just simply is not strong enough to handle any additional power that you put on the car. So the first time that I started having issues with the transmission was when I was making probably anywhere close to 195 to 200 wheel horsepower. The only modifications I had in terms of power was a tune and unequal length catless headers. And at that point, I had a synchro issue where the synchro in between third and fourth gear started to go out. So when I would shift in between third to fourth gear, it would grind when it's in higher RPMs. And sometimes it would actually lock me out and force me out of being able to go into that gear. So I took it to the Toyota dealership and they told me that I'm going to need a new transmission. There's either they'd have to go in and replace the synchro, or I need a new transmission, and it was just cheaper for them to put a new transmission in. So I ended up buying a new transmission or newer transmission for $1,000 and putting it in myself. I used that transmission for a while and I didn't really have any issues until I turbocharged the car. And at that point, when you turbocharge the car, you will start going through transmissions. After the first couple track days with the turbocharged transmission, I had an issue with, I believe it was third gear, where when I would try to shift into third gear, it would lock me out or it would grind. And it was an issue that was reproduced when other people would drive my car too. So it was not just my poor shifting abilities, it did reproduce itself with other drivers. At that point, I decided to say screw it with the stock FRS transmission, and I instead put the CD09 transmission, which is the transmission from a 350Z or G35. I bought a kit that allows you to install that transmission into the FRS BRZ86 platform. And I used that transmission for 1 or 2 track days before my motor blew, which we'll get into in a second. But that transmission did fix the problem. The only issue is it's very expensive. And that kit cost a little over $5,000, which is a lot, especially when you consider the fact that lightly used transmissions for the car are about $500. So you could go through a lot of FRS transmissions before you rack up the cost of the CD09 transmission. I just decided that I wanted a one and done to be done with the transmission issues with this car. Now, the next biggest issue that I had with the car has to be the engine, because it did blow. But it wasn't just the engine itself or having poor rods, which is the normal failure for that engine. The issue that I had was seemingly unique to my car because I don't know of many other people that had it, and that is an issue with blow-by. So ever since I turbocharged my car started having a lot of blow-by, which means it was leaking a lot of oil through the PCV system. When this first started happening, I had the FRS air oil separator, and the way that that was set up, it would feed the blow-by gases into the intake system, which essentially meant that I was just pouring oil into my intake system. Then I rerouted the FRS air oil separator to dump the oil underneath the car. So that was atmospheric ventilation. And what would happen with that is it would spray oil underneath my car. So the entire underbelly of my car had oil on it, in addition to the track getting oil on it. And also when it would spray that oil, the oil would touch the exhaust system and then burn. So my car would blow fumes of smoke, and it caused them to pull me off the track because it looked like my car was going to explode. The FRS or air oil separator removes the PCV valve. And the reason that it removes it is so there's no pressure in your crankcase. But I put the PCV valve back on, which reduced the amount of blow-by significantly, but still did not fix the problem. So then I bought the full-blown catch can. And the reason that I bought that is because when it would have the blow-by issue, instead of pouring it underneath the car, it would put it all in a can that I could eventually dump. But eventually what that led to is it dumped out so much oil into that can that it led to oil starvation, which blew my motor. Now, the reason that I say that the blow-by issue is kind of unique to me is because I've spent a lot of time on the forums looking to see if somebody else also has this issue, but I haven't really been able to find anybody anybody else who has as significant of a blow-by issue as I had. And I have one friend who had a very similar turbo setup to me, which is the G25550 Garrett turbo. He also had the same amount of blow-by, which eventually led to his motor blowing, but I'm not exactly sure why it seems like only a small handful of FA20s have serious blow-by issues while the other ones seem to be fine. The solution that I found for this issue is also an expensive one, and that is that I'm now using a dry sump system. So a dry sump system is a closed oiling system, which means that any blow-by is recirculated back into the system. So I don't have to worry about oil starvation because it's not leaking that oil out of the system. But that is a very expensive and not very simple solution. Now, one thing that you guys can look into is an AccuSump. So that's a more cost-effective solution if you have blow-by issues like my engine did. Now, there's one more issue that I'm going to talk about that I've personally experienced tracking the FRS, and that's fuel starvation. One of the issues that the FRS has is the way that the fuel tank in the car is shaped is it's kind of like a saddle shape. So what happens is when you go on a very hard left turn, all of the fuel goes to one side of the tank, but the fuel pump is on the other side of the tank. So what happens is if you go on a hard enough left turn and you do it for a long enough amount of time, the fuel pump doesn't have any fuel to continue sending to the motor. I had this issue at Auto Club Speedway, which is a roval, which essentially means it's like an IndyCar or NASCAR oval, but then half of it is a track. For the oval shape is when I experienced this issue. And what would happen is the car lost all power and then sent a huge backfire, like a gigantic backfire, and then the car would have no throttle, the throttle wouldn't do anything, and I had to turn off and turn on the car, and eventually the car was able to start. Now, the main issue with this is the fact that starving the motor of engine could detonate your motor. It's very not good for the motor, and probably shorten the lifespan of my motor every time that this happened. So there's a couple different things that you can do to fix this issue. The first one is FRS makes a door that stops the fuel from exiting your fuel pump. The fuel pump has a little can around it, and it stops the fuel from exiting around it. So essentially what happens is if you're going around the sharp turn, this door closes and forces the fuel to stay around the fuel pump, so you theoretically won't have any starvation issues. Another thing that you can do is make sure that you keep your car at either 50% or more fuel in the tank, because if you have more fuel than that, even when it gets shifted to one side, there's still enough fuel for the fuel pump to grab in order for the car to keep running. So that's the easiest solution. The only downside to that is having more fuel does mean more weight in the gas tank. Now, the third solution to that is to get an external fuel tank, but that's expensive and a lot of work, and you most likely have to get a firewall welded in. So I did not go down that route. I'm still using the stock fuel tank. Now, those are the main three issues that I've had while tracking the FRS, but these three issues, the transmission, the blow-by, and the fuel starvations, are all things that you should probably watch out for if you also track your FRS, BRZ, or 86. So that's going to do it for this video. This video was a recommendation by somebody who watches the channel and put in the comments that they'd like to see this video, and I really appreciate that recommendation. So if there's anything else that you guys want to see in terms of videos made, feel free to leave it in the comments below and I'll try to make it happen. That's going to be it for today, so thank you guys very much and have a good one.